for starting this program.
Muchas gracias, Jo. Good afternoon, everyone. Muy buenas tardes. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 9th session of Masterminds. Recuerden, aquellos que hablan solamente español, que tenemos interpretación simultánea en la parte inferior de sus pantallas, así que busquen el botón para que puedan tener esta interpretación en tiempo real. Last month, we hosted the Misión Indígena de Oaxaca para el Mundo, where we explored how traditional business could be applied to modern business practices. A special thank you to Kingala for continuing to organize these very impactful sessions. But today, in our mastermind session, we are honored to feature two distinguished experts who will share insights on leveraging technology for the public good. Allow me to introduce them. Kirsten Wyatt serves as the Senior Director of the Digital Service Network at the Big Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. Additionally, she's an elected school board member in Oregon's Wesleyan-Wilsonville School District and contributes as an editorial board member for the State and Local Government Review Academic Journal. Kirsten also serves on the board of directors for Politsit, a nonprofit supporting parental involvement in government by reimbursing child care costs. She's the founder and former executive director of the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network and the creator of the GovLab podcast. Kirsten has an extensive career in state and local government and holds a bachelor's degree in politics from Willamette University and a Master of Public Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. On the other hand, we have Cristina Martinez Pinto, who is the founder and CEO of the PIT Policy Lab, driving people-centered technology development and governance across Latin America and the Caribbean. With a master's in public policy from Georgetown University and a BA in international relations from Tec de Monterrey, Cristina has been recognized as a visionary leader in tech policy. She's a Wiley alumna and inaugural fellow of the Virginia Tech Institute for Leadership and Technology, a responsible AI fellow by the Stimson Center and Microsoft, and a GovTech LATAM fellow by the Inter-American Development Bank. In 2023, Cristina was honored as DEI Leader of the Year by Women in AI North America and received the prestigious Equals in Tech Award Women. She also serves on the advisory board of the Big Center for Social Impact and Innovation. This session promises to be both engaging and highly interactive. We encourage you to submit any questions you may have via the chat. These will be incorporated into the discussion over the next hour. So send them as soon as you can because those will be addressed as soon as you send them. So now please join me in warmly welcoming Kirsten and Cristina. Over to you, Cristina.
Thank you. Buenas tardes a todos y todas las personas que nos acompañan esta tarde, desde donde quiera que se encuentren. I'm so happy to be here this afternoon. I'm in Mexico City. And thank you for this kind of introduction. Really, thank you, Miguel, for the invitation, for the U.S. Embassy in Mexico support for this program, for the whole of the Kingala team, Stephanie, Jose Luis, and the rest of colleagues that are here that have supported and that have guided us through all the steps to make this happen. We're very, very excited to have these conversations. And not only to have the opportunity to learn from U.S. institutions and from U.S. leaders and to recognize best practices, but I think to do so in a format that allows us for a more private conversation, from a more one-to-one experience on where we can connect the dots on the things we have in common, perhaps the differences or the different decisions, choices that we've made through our career paths that have taken us to where we are today. So I really think I'd like to kick off the conversation that way. I mean, I think something that really excited me about this conversation with Kirsten is I think that we both share many things in common, specifically our passion for public policy, our intentionality around people-centered service delivery, public service delivery specifically, how we're using technology for the public good, and of course, how our paths connected through the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. But I think I would be really interested in learning, Kirsten, how is it that you got there, and how, like, what was this path from Oregon to DC, and just like, what's your story?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to our hosts for making today's event possible. So my path started in local government, and I think as people may know, it really is the most direct level of service that government offers. You're working directly with people. You are really hands-on with service delivery. And so what I observed while working for various cities across the US is, as technology was developing and evolving, citizens came to expect that same level of technology service from their government. And so, they may find that they could schedule a restaurant reservation online, but then they couldn't schedule, a sewer pipe inspection online. And so the question started to be, why not? And so for me, it really was an extension of how do we provide the very best service we can to the people in our communities. And that was where technology came into play. And so even from things as basic as, does your city have a great website so you can find what you need? When my kids were young, I wanted to find out, when is story time at the library? When is this community festival happening? And a well-designed website can do that, all the way up through things that are much more interactive. Being able to register for something, being able to pay your water bill. And so for me, it just was a natural extension of how we provide services. As my career went on, I found that what I really love doing is connecting the people who work in government to one another so they can have a supportive network. They can also learn from one another. Government is the original open source network. Everything government does can and should be shared. And so can we build out networks so the great things that happen in one city can be shared with another? And so that was really what brought me around to joining the Beck Center, and then building and leading the digital service network.
Well, I really love this concept of open source network. I think it's critical that we have these spaces, right, where we can share things that go right, things that go wrong, and then we can learn from each other and like bridge these learning gaps. And from your experience, what were these main common pain points that citizens were experiencing? Like, what were the first, because perhaps through the years you've seen an evolution in the kind of digital services that have been offered, but how have these pain points and people needs evolved through time in your career?
I think for when governments first started using web-based technology, it was kind of like a free-for-all. Like, people would design a website and you could look at one city and the website would be great, and the next one would just be like an absolute mess. And there wasn't this consistency because there wasn't the conversations about design systems and about best practices related to using plain language or figuring out design patterns that were consistent for the user, and really centering the user in the design of a site. And so I think as time has gone on, some of those things have become more consistent, and now governments are starting to grapple with, okay, how do we change the way that we deliver services to being able to do that online? And so what we saw was during the pandemic, it rapidly accelerated government's need to really quickly move a lot of their services online, because they were shutting down all of their offices, and customer service had to look a lot different when everything was moving online. And so you saw like really rapid adoption of fairly cutting edge technology for governments. Things like building inspectors doing housing inspections using iPads and cameras, all the way up to financial functions that previously had always been paper-based, all of a sudden having to find a way to do online payments, as well as the fact that here in the US, it resulted in a really critical need for social services. So things like unemployment, insurance and payments, things like nutrition assistance. And so you saw government having to innovate rapidly. And then once the pandemic was over, or seemingly over, um, then the question became, how do we sustain this? Maybe we put this together like, this was a stopgap, but now how do we continue to deliver services digitally going forward into the future?
And what do you think were the main challenges? Because on one side, you had really fast, rapid adoption that responded to a global pandemic and to the need to go online. But then on the other hand, you also had people that perhaps didn't have like great digital skills, and these were public servants at the local level. So what were the main challenges that they were facing, and how were local networks supporting them?
Such a great point. And I think it's something that we still are trying to be supportive of in helping governments build effective digital delivery teams. But I think a lot of times people were winging it, and they maybe were working with vendors to provide solutions that they could, in theory, provide in-house. And so it was just kind of an all hands on deck situation of like, how do we make this happen? But I think that that's where the power of knowing, your counterpart, the next city over, the next state over, asking questions, what are you doing, or what have you been hearing? One of the communities of practice that we run here at the Beck Center is for U.S. state chief AI officers. So the person who's designated from that state to kind of figure out what the heck we're going to do with AI. And some of the conversations that we have are as simple as, are you using ChatGPT? Are you using Claude? And it's people finding out what other states are using. And then when they find each other, they're going into a more in-depth conversation about governance, about the language in their agreements, about use cases. And so it really is that power of, if you know what your neighbor's doing, you can feel a little bit more confident in the choices that you might be making to pursue a particular solution or approach. And so the other aspect of what we're trying to do is replicate or show what great teams look like so people can hire for the right position. Because in this day and age, technology isn't the role of just one person in an organization. We have to kind of infuse this knowledge and understanding of digital delivery best practices across our organizations. And so getting people to think more like product managers, or having people really understand the basics of human-centered design is really critical. And it doesn't matter if you work in the budget office or in the water department or, in a state agency. Like, having that baseline knowledge is really important. And that's why being based at Georgetown is so great, because we get to work with students who are really the future of government service delivery. And so for them to start to learn more about, how all of these systems work is really inspiring to see. And I feel like we're in good hands with this generation that's really keenly interested in using technology for service delivery.
Definitely. And before jumping in specifically into the Beck Center, I'd love to ask you a question about, you were just mentioning about hiring the right people to make the best team. Who are these people? What are their profiles? And I ask this because, for instance, I have a background in social sciences, in international relations and public policy. And I remember when I started working in the tech field, I initially, I was interested in technology, but more from a science fiction standpoint, and from well, this is really interesting and something's happening with society, right? Like, it's impacting our relations, but I didn't necessarily see it as a professional path until I learned from the Beck Center and about the Data for Social Good initiative. This was back in 2015, and about the civic tech movement. Open government was just like on the rise. So I started seeing like a window of opportunity for social scientists and understanding the kind of skills that we brought to the table. But in your experience, like, who are the people filling in these roles? The AI officer, the data officer, the project managers? What's their background?
One of the key reminders that I often talk, especially to younger people or students, about is that working in technology and digital delivery these days doesn't mean that you have to know how to code or that you have to be an engineer, although obviously those are really critical parts of a technology operation. But often the folks who are leading the most successful digital operations, they're problem solvers, they're deeply curious, they like to put puzzles together or untangle knots. They're the type of people who understand how to break a problem down into its most basic elements and then systematically tackle each of the steps. Um, a good design team or a good digital team is going to have designers, they're going to have researchers, they're going to have content writers. And so, when talking to students, I often remind them that let's say you were an English major, in undergrad, and you get your public policy degree. Your future as a content designer could be incredible if you're a really talented writer. Similarly, if you're an artist and you go into design, or if you're interested in research, because all of those elements together are what make digital delivery possible. It's not just code, because if you design the most perfect app, but you've never tested it with the people who use it, you've never figured out the workflow for how the data is collected, it's not going to be perfect anymore. It's just going to be a tech tool. And so there's space for everybody in this field. And I think that the key is really raising up the understanding of the different jobs that are available, and then reminding people that if you have a public service ethos or a public service belief, that this is a field that you can also work in. And you don't have to just work for a company. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it is a way for you to work in public service and then use some of these special skills.
Yeah, definitely, to gain experience into social impact at scale, into government service delivery. I couldn't agree more. I think there's not enough emphasis in the need to work on the development of core skills through any career, right? It's not only technical skills that are in much need and that we see all the reports of the jobs of the future, but I think it's more about what is your added value, what you're really passionate and good at, and how that like your uniqueness can bring that value to a specific team. And I there's a really good book that's called The Fuzzy and the Techie that actually provides a lot of examples about this, right? How anthropologists are being hired by autonomous vehicles companies to understand better like a human decision-making process, or how theater majors are being also hired by Slack to provide like more of the humanity and more of the of this kind of the human interaction element. So I think what's fascinating is to remind ourselves about our humanity, and the humanity is a superpower, right? And to that point, sorry.
I was just going to say, and some of the most intriguing stories about digital innovation happening sometimes have nothing to do with technology and everything to do with these teams that have some of these unique skill sets to identify like what is human behavior and how do we like intervene and solve problems before they happen. And there's a great story of a federal agency, and they wanted to remind people that I think it was a type of health insurance was expiring, and they were just having a really hard time with getting people to pay attention. And so what they ended up doing is putting a notice on the front of the envelope. And so when people saw it in the mail, they didn't just throw it away. And so it wasn't a tech solution at all, but it was just a human solution and this idea of human-centered design. And then once the person opened the envelope, then yes, they could go in and use a technology or a website to renew what they were doing. But it's just a reminder that, being thoughtful about like the whole of a problem and then finding ways to solve it is part of what these teams are doing at every level of government.
No, definitely. I think this is critical. And again, another point that often gets lost as if it was like common sense knowledge. But what's really interesting, I think it isn't, right? Because it ends like I see a lot of digital solutions where the solutions themselves, like the technology, ends up being the center of the problem and the projects and not the people. and then you have a huge problem because perhaps the solution works, but the people are not adopting it, or not only about adoption, but the people that are implementing do not know how to harness and leverage like the data analysis that can come from it. So definitely, I think to this point, making sure that people that we are solving problems for are involved, and we're making sure that they are the end users and not necessarily the tool itself is major. And to this point, I want to come back to what we were mentioning about the Beck Center being hosted in Georgetown University in DC, of all cities. How do you connect to this institution? How do you start working at the work that you're doing? What is the Beck Center? If you can also introduce our audience to the Beck Center, please.
Of course. So we work on social impact and innovation projects. And what that means currently is we run 2 different networks. One is related to digital benefits, and then one is related to digital service. That's the network that I run. We also have programs for city innovation, and then another program for state data efforts. And so we are a philanthropically funded center based out of a university. And to me, this is really the best of all worlds because we have the credibility of the Georgetown University institution. Governments that work with us know that we're not selling a product. We are a trusted partner. We are solution agnostic. We are vendor neutral. And that's important because when a government is charged with standing up a new digital service, they know that they could get calls from every vendor under the sun trying to sell them something. But sometimes if they're just getting started, what they need is a network to go to and ask questions about, or being able to read our research. We do a lot of storytelling about what digital innovation looks like, what are some examples of it. And so the placement of us being at a university is perfect because it really gives us that credibility to step in and be a partner working side by side with government, instead of a sense of like we're trying to sell you something on the side. So, and then I think that the fact that our students are just very intelligent. It's a highly selective school. And so we have students that work on all of our projects. And I often remark that these students are so professional and they're so ready for the working world. And they're just excited because they're, in our nation's capital, they are doing other interesting internships. And so it really is just a wonderful way to be able to work with students and expose them to all of these great jobs that they could have working in government when they graduate.
Yeah, definitely. I was one of these students back in 2016.
Yes.
And I always, it's like the story that I share about my own journey through the Beck Center, because it is not only the institution where I started learning from this open government, open data, civic tech, data for good, or just like tech for good ecosystem environment, but also where I got the opportunity to work as a student analyst and to have a say in the projects. Right? It was it didn't feel like an internship where I was just like serving coffee or like this kind of experiences that you hear a lot from other internship experiences. I think it was a conversation where our thoughts as students were appreciated and given the kind of themes that we're addressing, because they have to do with emerging technologies, about what's going on with social relationships, with new social networks and interactions. I think there's a huge role for students to even play a leadership role in the different projects, right? Or how has your experience been through the different cohorts of student analysts that you've had?
So we have developed a research framework for what we call spotlights, which are short form research papers about different digital delivery projects. And so what we do is we identify, something interesting that's happening in the ecosystem, and then we research it, and then we collect the artifacts that the government used to implement that solution. And then we bundle it all together and we put it in our library. And so the research framework we've written allows students to write these spotlights for us. And so obviously we're still there to provide some supervision and some perspective, but what I love about it is our students are getting to meet government practitioners of all levels of government. They're getting to write a piece that gets published on the Beck Center website and the Digital Government Hub. And they're directly contributing to growing knowledge about this particular digital delivery system. And so for me, it's really about empowering the students to graduate and then have something they can share on their LinkedIn profile or use as a writing sample when they're applying for a job. And so we're trying to do exactly what it sounds like you had your experience, which is empowering students to be part of our teams. And we're not saying, sit on the sidelines and watch. We're saying, come jump right in, get to know folks, get to know people. And so, interestingly, we were able to just hire back one of our students who was a student analyst when I started. She's now our digital government hub coordinator for the Digital Service Network. Amazing, amazing woman who is doing a wonderful job, but it was really great to watch her go full circle from student analyst to now Beck Center employee.
Yeah, I love this success story because I think that it's much more than just a summer or a semester experience. It really touches people's lives, and it shows you, it opens possibilities for you, right?
Absolutely.
For me, it opened the possibility not only of a new professional path, but from there I got to go work at the World Bank at the Digital Development Global Practice, another space that I never thought about as a place that was possible for me because of my background. So it was just like tearing up these myths or these barriers that actually I think I set to myself, or like the kind of the stories that we tell to ourselves of where we want to be or what we can become. And it was just and it started at the Beck Center, right? And it started by this empowering, by believing in the kind of skills that I have, but also being very intentional on learning about all these new methodologies around social impact, innovation, social entrepreneurship, and then the whole evolution of the field. And something that I think it's really interesting that has been happening with the Beck Center is that it has been maturing and evolving, and also going through a lot of introspection in terms of where it started. It's celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year. So, and it's the work is anchored to the evolution of the public interest technology community of practice. So I'd love just to pick your brains on public interest technology. What is it to you? Why is it different from other fields of practice? Or what are your thoughts on PIT overall?
So I think it is this very important and noble use of technology to solve problems in a way that's responsible and responsive and equitable. And, I think sometimes we talk about civic tech, or we talk about gov tech, or PIT. And I think generally it's just a very inclusive term to talk about the people who work not just for government, but for companies and organizations that work alongside government and civil society to solve the trickiest problems that are out there. And that's important, because if things are left to the government to provide or solve, because there's not a private sector solution, or there's not a market for it. And so these are some of the trickiest and most pressing issues that we have. And so to have a community of people who are dedicated to solving these problems in a very responsible way is absolutely critical. And so I think as we try to grow awareness of the fact that you can have a job and you can be working for the public good and making a big impact, the public interest tech community is just critical to bringing all of those values and talents to address these issues.
And how do you think that, or what are some examples of bridging successful collaborations between the public and the private sectors, and especially coming from being hosted and coming from the world of academia and of think tanks.
So one event that we have coming up, and it is free, it's a virtual event. It's called Forum Fest. So it's all about government forums. Last year we had 2,000 people from around the world join us. But what we have found is that forums are often the most basic way that people engage with their government. It's the entry point for so many services. And in the US, we know that only 2% of government forms are digitized. And so that means that, and we have lots of examples. Our executive director of the Beck Center, Lynn Overman, will be sharing a few at FormFest, where you have to print the form and then handwrite it with a pen and then mail it in. And so a lot of the speakers at FormFest are from government agencies, and then they're partners with companies that are experts in design, in technology, in security, that allows for them to make forms that are digitized, and not just digitized, which is the quick way, which we've seen, which is you can fill it out, but you still need to print it, and the data's not going anywhere. And so it's this, but what we're excited about is a lot of our speakers are bringing together the private sector person who worked with government for them to problem solve and then share out what they've done. Because a well-designed form is going to be equitable, it's going to be accessible, it's going to make sure that when you're filling out the form, it's collecting information that the government's actually going to use. It's not just, oh, we've always collected this, we're going to keep doing it. And so we're really excited to be able to show so many examples of these partnerships between public and private, which are essential if we're going to make any headway and make it that, more of these forms, again, the most basic way that we engage with government, can get better.
I think this is a brilliant idea. Where did it come from? Like, who said, like, well, why not celebrating forms? Because again, it's so basic, right? We've all engaged, and we've all, I think, suffered having to fill in forms once and over again, and ask ourselves, like, why hasn't anyone thought about digitizing or just like interoperability or what's going on? So, I mean, whose ideas was it? And which countries are participating?
So it is the brainchild of me and then my colleague, Marlena Medford, who's with Code for America. She and I have been friends for a long time. We both used to work in local government, which is how we met. And we just thought, let's celebrate and recognize forms. And so it's a little like, if you go to, I just put the website in the chat, but we want to make it a day of celebration, of recognition for form innovation. We picked a logo that looks like a concert festival because it's Form Fest, because we want to really recognize the work that's being done. And what has been exciting is we did a call for session submissions. We received 80 different amazing ideas. We were able to select 20. So folks will be able to hear from main stage speakers as well as concurrent sessions. And this year we have speakers from Canada, Iceland, Germany, Denmark, and the UK, as well as US. We don't have any from Mexico this year, but maybe next year. But again, just reminding us that forms are government's universal language. Everyone's using forms, and different countries are prioritizing improving them differently. And so we'll have a chance to hear about that as well.
No, this is really great, because it goes at the core of innovation, right? Of just like doing things differently, and recognize the most basic units where we can work from, the common interests or the common things that bind us together, which usually are forms. And yes, huge opportunity for the Latin America region to perhaps join the next edition, because I'm pretty sure there's many experiences around not only the development story, but about like good practices, not only about failures, about things that can actually work and that have these intentional teams behind them supporting them. And about that, I wanted to segue a little bit, because at the beginning you were telling us about the two different big tents of work that the Beck Center has around digital benefits and about the digital service network. So we know that you had the latter, the digital service network. So how did it start? How is it structured? What are its main objectives?
So our goal is to empower governments to use human-centered strategies to deliver digital services that meet the needs and expectations of anyone who uses them. And so by that we mean we want to lift up and recognize and showcase the people doing the work in government. And so other governments can learn from one another. And so the organization is open to anybody working in public interest technology. We do host some different communities of practice that are limited just to government practitioners, so they can have a safe space to share ideas and exchange information and get feedback from one another. And so we have one that's role-based for chief digital service officers, and then a second that's topic-based for user experience researchers. And so in running these communities of practice, we also support them with research and with events. FormFest is our biggest event, but we often do smaller convenings to bring people together. And then another huge cornerstone of what we're doing is our digital government hub. And this is designed to be, and I'll put this in the chat as well, this is designed to be a one-stop shop to get information about a wide variety of topics related to data, design, and technology. And so it includes a lot of examples. And by that, we mean if a government has written a policy, we put that policy into the library. And so another government can come and find it and copy and paste it and make it their own. And so this is a huge part of us just opening up the space and making it really easy for people to find what they need.
Sorry, I was speaking and I was muted, but I wanted to ask you about how do you measure the network's impact? Is it like by these usual measures of number of events, number of members, number of state, or like how can we get the qualitative aspects of these networks, right? The richness of people connecting to each other. How are you doing it currently?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, it takes having Beck-centered leadership that believes in the power of networks, and that recognizes that sometimes measuring that impact is more difficult because it's not something where there's one perfect measure. So we use a wide variety of measures, ranging from the number of people who are on our mailing list, but then we start to dig a little deeper and we look into things like our open rates on our emails, engagement on the Digital Government Hub, attendance at events, looking at social media engagement and finding ways that we're starting conversations and then people are engaging with them. But what I'm most grateful for is that the Beck Center has really leaned into this idea that networks matter, and sometimes we get qualitative information from our members saying, this organization was a lifesaver. Like, I didn't know what I was doing related to this topic. I had a chance to ask in the Digital Service Network. I got the answer I needed, and I was able to put a solution in place. And so we also rely on that type of impact measurement as well to just get those stories directly from the governments that we engage with.
And And fantastic. But to give us an idea of the kinds of examples that are part of this digital government hub, the one-stop shop,
Mhm.
could you tell us a couple of stories of what we might find there if we're interested in digging a little bit deeper into best practices or
Mhm.
even into failures?
Mhm. Yes, so recently we did a profile of the New York State um, Chief Customer Experience Officer. And so the state of New York has prioritized the customer experience of anyone engaging with the state's online tools and resources. So they hired a really dynamic leader from the private sector to run the state's CX efforts. And so, in addition to telling the story about how the state decided to have this position, we also collected her job description, the playbook that she uses to do her work in the state, and then also the policy directive by the governor to create this position. And so, if you go to the library, if you're a state or a city or really any level of government that's interested in prioritizing customer experience, you can pull that job description, copy it, and have that be your job description for your organization. You can go and pull that playbook and find out here are all the steps that they're using to better engage their customers, and put that in play in your organization. And so the goal is to really humanize the work. So tell the story about what's happening, but then give you all of the tools that you might need to make those same innovations happen in your organization. And so we've also done things like we've done a scan of all of the digital service teams in the US. And so we have things like their budgets and their authorizing legislation. And so if you're a government that says, I would like to have my own digital service team, you can scan through this database and find an organization that's, roughly the same size or same structure, and you can replicate that as well. So our hope is that it just opens up, shines some sunlight on all of these different tools that are out there and makes it easy to find.
And are you aware of any kind of collaboration that has stemmed one-on-one through local government between local governments through the information that you're sharing open source in this hub?
Yes, so I just heard a great example. We recently shared resources from the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, and they have a very robust user research compensation policy. So when they ask community members to come in and offer feedback, they pay them for their time to show, we value you, we want you to participate. And so we did a profile of the woman that runs the program. We shared all of their policies, their legislation that authorized compensation. And then we learned the other day that a woman from a different local government reached out to her and just said, oh my goodness, we've been looking for something. I want to replicate this. Can I talk to you and learn more about how you made this happen? And so they got on the phone, were able to talk through all of the steps that it took to make this compensation policy get adopted. And so stories like that are really inspiring because, again, it just puts that human in the loop of getting information and then putting it into play, in different government organizations.
Yeah, like gathering the stories, putting a face, knowing
Yeah,
that it is impacting people. I think it's what really
yeah,
matters, right? About this work. Uh,
exactly.
we're gonna in a brief moment we're gonna have some space for Q&A. So if anyone has a question, you can please write it on the chat so we can start taking a look at it. But just to close like this segment,
Mhm.
I'd love to learn, Kirsten, what are the plans for 2025 for the Digital Service Network, and what kind of role might the international community space play short to midterm plan? Like what kind of learnings from the LAC region or other regions we can get from this hub, and how we can contextualize and potentially replicate, or potentially like hold a Form Fest in Mexico or in another Latin American country? Like, is this in the 2025 2026 timeline?
So we continue to grow, and anyone is welcome to join. We currently do not have translation services for our events or for the Digital Government Hub, but that is something that, as we continue to grow into other parts of the world, could be a possibility. But if people are interested in learning more and participating in events or community of practice meetings, always welcome to. As we look into 2025, we have a very robust research schedule. So we're planning on doing a lot more storytelling around the work being done, and then adding to the Digital Government Hub the different government resources that are available and that power that work. We also anticipate having an in-person convening for Chief Digital Service Officers, so they're able to spend time together in person and get to know each other and learn about the work being done. We also anticipate doing more self-service technical assistance. And so, for example, we recently published a problem identification workshop toolkit. And so governments can go in and take that off the shelf and adapt it for them to be able to do an inventory of what their digital delivery capacity is. So I think our hope is to continue to grow, and then make sure that the governments around the world know that this is a resource place, and then evolve that to hopefully include more translation opportunities, because right now it is all in English and it's been primarily focused on the US, although we would love to grow across North America as well.
No, I think there's a really big opportunity to potentially expand some of these experiences, to translate some of the materials and exchange best practices. But because I think that there are a lot of initiatives and projects and ideas that are being born, hosted, developed in Latin America, that if you compare like the size of cities or the type of challenges that they might be facing at the local level, they might go, and in the US, but I know that other countries in the region are also very intentional in the work that they're doing towards digital service delivery, towards the creation of teams, towards the backing up of these teams with the technology policy that needs to be in place, so that they have the tools and the resources and the capacities to do this work. So I think that definitely, like the possibility for work at a regional scale is really big. And
I agree.
And I think that to start like closing, and perhaps we're gonna have we have one question from someone that asked if the spotlight, where are the spotlight series, like if they can access them, if you could share with us the link to the website, that would be great, so that they can take a look at those. They were asking about like these reports, like if they're available. I think everything is hosted in the Beck Center website, right? But
yes, and I think if you just go to this Digital Government Hub, and then it functions like a library, so you can search for Spotlight, or for whatever it is, whatever the topic is that you're looking for. Here's a spotlight that we did that is all about forms, and this is actually forms in Canada. So if you're getting excited about Form Fest, here's a form focused spotlight, so you can get a sense of how these are structured and how we attach the different artifacts that inform the work.
Great. And I think like I'd love to ask you, like, to close this conversation, as many of the people in the audience or youth that might look at this session afterwards or wherever it's hosted. I think we're in the world of social impact, social entrepreneurship, and the leveraging of digital technologies for the public good. So I'd love to hear, like, what's your advice for them on one side, like your own advice through your experience, but then what kind of advice have you received? What has been the best professional or personal advice that you've received, and perhaps the worst? Either or both.
So my dad used to always say when I was a kid, when you get to the end of your life, or when you're sitting in your rocking chair and you're retired, do you want to look back on your life and say, I changed the color of shoelaces on those shoes from pink to green? Or do you want to say, I was out in the world making a difference and improving systems to work for everybody? And it has always stuck with me because I think that that is why choosing public interest technology as a path is so powerful, because there are a million different ways that government needs talented people to come in and help solve these really tricky problems. And so it doesn't matter what organization you join, at what level of government, you're going to be able to get in there and make a difference, and you're going to be able to change somebody's life. And if you're working at the federal or national level of government, if you're working at the state level, you're often dealing with issues that are life and death, that you have people who are relying on government services for healthcare and for food and for rental assistance. And so you get to make that choice of how you spend your career, and choosing it to work in public service is just incredibly impactful. And so the other advice that I received that I think has been really important has been be who you needed when you were younger. And so it's this idea that as you reflect on your career, no matter what level you're at, if you can be that support or be that guide to help somebody younger than you become successful or find that path that's right for them, that's really important. And I think that's why I just love working with students so much here at Georgetown. But I think for all of us, being able to reflect on what would have helped me the most when I was still figuring out, how to do this project, and then being that person, I think is really helpful. I can't think of any bad advice right now, but if I think of any, I'll let you know. But those, I think, are my two main items.
Oh, thank you for sharing, because I think they're very personal. They're like a North Star, and they're very powerful. And especially the second one, it really resonated. I was thinking through the different points in my career, and the people that just like believed in me and helped me and invited me and opened doors. And of course, I mean, life is you always have like ups and downs, and sometimes perhaps you put all your eggs in a basket and you think something's going to work out and it doesn't, and you have to just like be resilient and keep on going. But I definitely think there are some key people that are always there for you, to support you. And I remember, because I also want to share two special advices that different persons gave me at different points in life as well. But one of them had to do with self-awareness, right? To understanding what's your own story, but also what are your resources, and not necessarily financial resources, but because we often tend to think about perhaps like money, or like for a job search, like how long I can hold. But it goes a bit deeper than that. It goes into understanding what are your networks of support. Is it your family? Is it a partner? Is it friends? It's no one. So you can just rely on yourself. And from there, taking the choices that you can take, but very, very aware of the constraints and also the possibilities that you have. And I think that has become like something that's interesting, and that from time to time I'm conscious about of course the privilege that I am in, and in the position that I am now, but also the whole road taken, like the path, the decisions that took me to the place where I am today. And another one, I remember when I was in Georgetown at my master's, I was part of a team, it was like I'm trying to remember what was the name of the initiative, but it was part of like a policy innovation lab, and we were working with former President Laura Chinchilla, and she was just like this amazing, like rock star, of course, like one of the first female presidents in the region. And I asked her about public speaking, like how do you make it happen so like seamlessly, so easily, like so with such elegance, right? And I remember she told, I think someone has their mic open. Let me see if we can just turn it off. Yeah, I think it's off now. No, give me one quick second.
Let's see.
Stephanie, is there a possibility of, yes.
Es Norma Leticia.
Norma, I think your mic is open, but it's okay now. So no, okay, no. Well, anyway, I'll try to keep speaking, and then we'll see if she can hear us back. Norma, Leticia, if you can hear us, thank you. Yes, and just like ask her just advice on public speaking, and she said like, well, of course, for starters, anyone that asks you to speak in public does it because you have something to say and they want to learn from you. Nobody wants to go to a place and say like, this was so boring, right? Like they were terrible and I didn't learn anything. Like no one would put their time into something that they don't think will add value to what they want to learn. So that first, and then the second was like, of course, you got to be prepared. And being a woman, sometimes in very heavily like male spaces, you have to be double prepared. But like if you have the self-confidence of knowing what you know and that you have something to tell others, I think owning that is like it's just become a great gift for the future. And yeah, I can't think of. I was also trying to think of a negative advice, and perhaps there's been a few, but nothing that I can recall now. But I really like to close our conversation on that end. I think this was a wonderful opportunity to learn from you from a personal level, from your experience working in the public service and on the digital service delivery through the leveraging of emerging technologies, of new technologies or basic technologies, of the work that the Beck Center is doing. And we really hope to continue working. I'm really excited to be part of the advisory board and to continue to learn about the amazing work that the Beck Center is set to do in the next 10 years by celebrating its first 10.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the whole team for making today's technology and opportunity happen. I just really appreciate all of you, and thank you, especially Cristina, for moderating today's session.
Well,
okay, you again. Yeah, we'll be back with Laura, Jose Luis, and Stephanie. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, before moving forward, we would like to thank you, both of you. Your insights and opinions were like pretty useful and meaningful for all of us. And since we're going to wrap up, we're so excited to proceed with the giveaway of our book, and we expect to have more sessions with useful information like this one. Let's see who's the winner of our book. And the winner is Elizabeth Arguello. We want to congratulate you for this distance, and we're going to keep in touch so we can get your information. So thank you all, and we're going to be closing up this session.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. And thank you, Miguel, for all the support from the embassy. Actually, he has the book. So the book is gonna go from the embassy to your house. So that's a perfect gift from the embassy. So thank you very much for being here. We hope to see you the next month. We're gonna be having these sessions continuously for the following months. So please keep in touch. And well, we are very happy to have this session with you the next month. Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Kirsten,
Have a great
Cristina.
evening. Bye. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you.
Bye. Cuídense.
Bye.